Hello everyone, Marty Extension Wrestlers here, and today I'm gonna give you guys my 5 characters that I would like to see as the combat guest in the next Mortal Kombat. Now I'm gonna put a disclaimer. Usually when it comes to the Mortal Kombat universe, they have often either picked characters from who either fit into the franchise or were horror villains like Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees, a Xenomorph, and Predator. These are all characters who works perfectly well in the Mortal Kombat universe. Mortal Kombat has also had some DC characters, and for this, in some of their own characters as well. However, just like Rain and Scarlet in Mortal Kombat 9. However, just for the sake of this video, I will just be looking at 5 other universes where I think the Mortal Kombat universe can work very interesting. Side note, it has to be from a completely different universe. This universe has either never crossed over with Mortal Kombat or has crossed over with others. So, yeah. So, story at number 5, I have actually 2 picks, and that is M. Bison and Vega from Street Fighter. Now, usually when most people ask a combat guest character, Ryu has always been number 1, and that's completely understandable. Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter, it's technically in a way it's Marvel versus DC, except in fighting games, which is ironic because both Marvel and DC have crossed over with Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter countless times. Mortal Kombat and DC has had an extensive history in the Marvel vs. Capcom series. However, Capcom has kind of refused with particularly Ryu. And that's probably because they don't want any of their characters to get fatalities, which, fair enough. However, they never really said they were allowed, they were fair free to use Vega or Bison. And I think these 2 characters arguably are better picks than Ryu, and here's why. Bison has the psycho power, which essentially allows him to come back from the dead. Street Fighter really isn't known for the over the top crazy nonsense that Tekken or Mortal Kombat are known for. Mortal Kombat is definitely more diverse with aliens, monsters, demons, etc., ninjas. So that's why I think Bison works perfectly well. Plus, if you really think about it, Bison is usually depicted as the most evil character, not in all of Capcom, but in all of Street Fighter. So, and in Mortal Kombat, usually the most evils are typically considered to be Shang Tsung or Shao Kahn, which are more understandable. So I think Bison works perfectly well. Now, granted, I should also address that I'm not as familiar, and I'm just starting to learn more about other Mortal Kombat characters. So there might be others who are far worse than Shao Kahn or Shang Tsung. But from my knowledge at the moment, I'd say Shang Tsung or Shao Kahn are like the most evil. But yeah, I need to learn more about the other villains. It's just there's not that many sources for me to learn about. So yeah. So yeah. Now there's a reason why I pick Vega is because for a few reasons. One, he's a sociopath, so I think he works perfectly well with the Mortal Kombat universe because you know Vega is also kind of been known as to be a weirdo at times. Even Juri Han called him a perv. So I thought, yeah, I think Vega in a way is a little bit weirdo because of the fact that he has an obsession with beauty and, you know. As for these guys, so I think he works into the Mortal Kombat universe perfectly well. Then say someone like Balrog or Sagat, because at best, those guys don't really work in a Mortal Kombat game. In my personal opinion, you can personally make them work in a Mortal Kombat game. That's perfectly fine. But in my opinion, I think Vega works best. Now, as for these two's fatalities, Bison would obviously have where he just flies into you and you explode. That would be his primary fatality. As for the second fatality, I think it's where he just brainwashes you and you just essentially bow down to him before you eventually die. I think that works best as like his second fatality because he just brainwashed you, which is what he's known for, as he's brainwashed Ken, Ryu, Cammy, countless Street Fighter characters throughout the year. So I think that has to be one of his fatalities. And yeah, as for Vega, I think his fatalities are probably going to be just like Baraka's, and except for the cannibalism, because Vega is a normal human. He's just a social weirdo at best. Like, here's how I can picture. He can actually have two fatalities for both. So it means he kind of would be the only one with four in a weird way. But yeah, like every fatality that's for male, he just scars them up. Like, say if you play Vega and he does a fatality against, say, someone like Baraka, yeah, you carve him up completely, making him more ugly. Whereas, say, someone like Katana, just probably murder her at best. Yeah, that's how I can see his two fatalities, at least for one. His other ones would probably be more of, probably something similar with Baraka, at least with the claws. Now, number 4. Thomas Richards from the Walking Dead comics. Now I know Negan from The Walking Dead show got introduced and got into Tekken 7 alongside Akuma from ironically Street Fighter. Hey, Street Fighter Walking Dead crossover. How about that? I wanted to do a Walking Dead character, however, I thought which character fits the Mortal Kombat universe well or well enough. And ironically, I thought it really can't be Rick because, in the comics, and I'm just looking at the comics, nothing to do with the AMC show. Rick in the comics was more like Raiden, so I thought, he probably wouldn't work. Plus, I don't even know how they can incorporate Rick. But I thought Thomas Richards arguably works better because, if you ask me who is the most evil character in the Walking Dead comics, just the comics. Most people say either the governor or the whisperers, but I thought, as dark as those guys are, I think none are worse than Thomas Richards. Hell, I'd say even the Marauders, there's in the comics, were not as bad as Thomas Richards because Thomas Richards generally works perfectly well in Mortal Kombat. You know, with the Mortal Kombat games having that, it originally started out with slashers like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Leatherface. I thought, yes, I think Thomas Richards works perfectly well. So that's why to bring back. Plus, I can kind of see that some of the comic characters had kind of died out. Back in Mortal Kombat 9 or Mortal Kombat 10, they were like extremely popular because of the fact that they was something unique. Whereas in later games, it kind of died down, and I can totally see that. So that's why I decided to bring back the slashers just to give that more horror appetite. As for his fatalities, it's so easy. The number one thing is he essentially cuts your head off, which, yeah, that isn't something new in Mortal Kombat, but as a fatality, it works perfectly well with Thomas Richards, given that he chopped out two girls in the comics. So that's why I thought he works perfectly for the game. As for the second one, I was thinking of doing like a Kano where he just either rips out your heart or rips out your brain, something like that. That would probably be a second one. Number 3, we have Sweet Tooth. Yeah, Sweet Tooth from the Twisted Metal games. The way I can see this guy is simple. He would essentially be, yeah. And imagine like in the intros, because they now do intros. Like imagine characters like Liu Kang mistaken for Joker. It would be really. It was also gonna be. It would be really nice reference to DC as well. So that's another thing. But the reason why I think Pennywise works. Pennywise. Oh, set the second one. The reason why I think Sweet Tooth works is because of the fact that, honestly, I think he fits the Mortal Kombat games perfectly well. The design is very Mortal Kombat esque. Does not mean he fits in Mortal Kombat. He has a Mortal Kombat esque like a design that you would more likely see in Mortal Kombat. Not to mention with his story, I think it works perfectly well with the Mortal Kombat games. As for his fatalities, well, I think one of them has to where he uses the truck and essentially just explodes you like you're already like he just saws you up, and all he decides to do next is just explode you with his sweet truck, basically overkill. Yeah, that would be one of them. As for a second one, he probably would just stab you in the eye with the scissors, kind of like in the cutscene when the PS3 version where you see Sweet Tooth get stabbed in the eye, and that's what he probably would do. It would be very reminiscent of the knife fatalities Kano has in some of his fatalities. Number two is Pennywise. Pennywise is probably the one I think. Yeah, Pennywise is probably the least likely. That's not Bison or Vega. I do think Bison and Vega are far less likely than Pennywise, and here's why. Because Pennywise is essentially just I think Pennywise has sort of died down. Whereas with Bison and Vega, it's because Capcom has some restrictions, which you have to kind of also respect, and that's kind of the thing. I won't just say, "Oh, I hate Capcom" because they wouldn't allow Ed Boon because of that. No, you have to also respect that in their eyes, it's not really good, and is it really going to be worth it? So yeah. And I think in this case, Pennywise is a little bit less likely than either than Bison or Reagan here. And yeah, Pennywise, as I could see for his fatalities, his first one would be um, where he essentially surely you recreate that horror scene where he's in the sewer and he grabs a kid, and all that. You basically recreate that scene, as I think it's a perfect representation of the character. Now, as for a second one, he would essentially turn and do some crazy to his like true form. I don't know. I haven't seen the second film, and I don't care to plan to watch it. Yeah, I don't like the It franchise. Sorry, Pennywise fans, you're gonna hate me for this. But I do think that if he transformed into his demonic version, then yeah, that's where I could see him. That's where I can see him you doing that fatality. Now, as to why I chose him is because honestly, much like Sweet Tooth, he actually fits the Mortal Kombat universe, probably the best one out of all of these characters. If I'm being brutally honest. Oh, even my number one pick, which probably is gonna shock all of you, probably won't even work that well in a Mortal Kombat game, but if you have at first, but unless you really look into it, oh yeah. The reason why I think Pennywise also works is because it's a mixture of both horror and demons, and Mortal Kombat is especially known for that. Maybe not so much the horror aspect, but more the demon side. So yeah. Alright. I've said all my Mortal Kombat guest character. There's one character that I swear to you, all of you will never imagine I would have picked. And it's ironically not even from any of these other franchises or any franchise that's even remotely similar to Mortal Kombat. And I present to you my number one combat character is Eric Cartman. Now, yes, you heard that right. Eric Cartman from South Park. Now, you might be asking yourself, how the hell would Eric Cartman work in a Mortal Kombat game? And it's simple, my friends. You see, most South Park fans would know Cartman is like the most diabolical, or one of the most diabolical characters in the show. Probably the most diabolical. No, he essentially killed parents and just fed them to his. Yeah, it's messed up. And I have to say, I can understand why most people can at first say Cartman should not work in this game, but he actually can. You see, Cartman essentially could be kind of is essentially like an antagonist in South Park. Yeah, I consider him an antagonist, much like Peter Griffin on Family Guy. So that's why I think he works perfectly well. But I think what could be interesting is his fatalities. Now, obviously his main fatality has to be his Chili Con Carnival one, where he essentially does that. So basically what he does is he essentially is just gonna have you killed, and hacksaw and capture you and hacksaw you and turn you into chili, and he essentially feeds it it, and to a point that even people start to notice, yeah, mess up people. Obviously, before the analysis said, fatality, Eric Cartman wins, flawless victory, or without the flawless victory. But I think the reason why Cartman also works is because he also has a sense of, I don't know. You see, the problem is the Mortal Kombat characters, most of them, even the good guys, aren't really the most heroic. Like, if you ask me, which game are more heroic, like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter? I'd probably say Street Fighter because, yeah, you have characters like Ryu who doesn't care about saving the world for some strange reason, just because of his fighting. But even then, I still think even he's more heroic than 99% of Mortal Kombat's heroes. You see, Scorpion is an anti-hero. Sub-Zero, Kuai Liang, I should also mention. Because I know the latest game turned him into Scorpion. Or there's a version of the character. And I thought, yeah, Kuai Liang is still an anti-hero at best. Because he does do some really questionable things. Liu Kang, yeah, even the main poster boy, Liu Kang, is a bit of has kind of questionable deeds. Katana, you see, the list goes on, and that's why I feel like with Cartman around, he can kind of bring that more antagonistic back as well. Yeah, and I will also include Raiden as well. As for Cartman's second fatality, to be honest, I haven't really thought much about it, but it probably would be because he's from a different universe. He gives the any fighter his blood, which essentially gives them AIDS and HIVs, which essentially makes them explode. The reason why I thought of it is because I thought, what would be the second best for Cartman? And I thought it has to be that, because when I look at some of the worst things Cartman does that he's done physically, like what he did with Scott Tenorman's parents, I thought, yeah, that I can definitely incorporate in a Mortal Kombat game. But what about anything else? And I thought the HIV, because I was watching a video about Cartman, and I thought, hey, that could work as a second fatality. And to be honest, I even said it on Reddit. Most people are fine with Mortal Kombat, Eric Cartman being the next guest character. Just more than sure how he can be incorporated, but they're fine with him. So for me, I think Eric Cartman is probably the perfect character to fit in a Mortal Kombat game because of the fact that, yeah, while it may seem odd. I will not blame you guys. However, you gotta also acknowledge, honestly, it actually makes sense. At best, he's just a kid, but he does all these incredible things to a point that it doesn't, to a point where it's like, yeah, he does fit this universe well. And so that is the number one reason why I pick Eric Cartman as the number one Mortal Kombat guest character that I wanted. Plus, if you watch South Park, you would know Cartman actually does do a lot of things that would make him perfect for Mortal Kombat. So that's about it. And thank you all for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time. Goodbye.
Friend Marvel DC Extinction Wrestler.
What the hell is this?
What this is a statement against the war in Iraq. It's wrong that we still have our troops there. It's wrong!